Now, His Majesty the King has vowed not to stand in the way if Australia wants to become a republic. He told anti-monarchist campaigners that whether Australia becomes a republic is a matter for the Australian public to decide. The remarks were made in a letter sent to the Australian Republic movement by his Assistant Private Secretary ahead of the King's historic 6-day official visit to the country next week. Well, joining me to discuss this is the royal broadcaster and historian Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Rafe, is this a sign of Britain just giving up? You know, the Chagos Islands have gone. We're talking now about Gibraltar. The Argentinians are getting their knickers in a twist again about the Falklands. Should His Majesty the King really have said that? I mean, no one in Australia seriously thought he was going to send over the troops if Australia voted to get rid of him.
No, these are two completely separate things. I mean, the abandonment of the Chagos Islands is terrible. Look, we've had Gibraltar since 1713. The Spanish legally and lawfully handed it over to us as part of the Treaty of Utrecht after the War of the Spanish Succession. Any idea that we're going to give that back is for the birds. But what the King is doing here is simply reiterating existing policies. So we can't confuse the two issues here. Look, whenever there's a royal visit to Australia, inevitably discussions about whether it should become a republic are raised. This is no different. So ARM, the Australians for a Republic, have written to the King, and the palace has responded as it always does and says, look, as a democratic constitutional monarchy, the decision of the future of the monarchy is for the Australian people to decide. That's precisely what they said in 2021 when Barbados became the last realm to become a republic, and before that in 1992 when Mauritius became a republic as well. And that's what Her late Majesty said in 1999 when Australia had a referendum on the issue led by the Republican Prime Minister Paul Keating, called the Lizard of Oz by Fleet Street, and that referendum was entirely defeated. And so what they've said again was essentially, you know, the royal family's affection for Australia won't be diminished however the Australian people decide in the future. But the key thing here is there is no appetite in Australia for a referendum. You know, Anthony Albanese, the current Prime Minister, it's his long-standing policy to make Australia into a republic. But he's still smarting from a humiliating defeat on a separate referendum about whether Aborigines in Australia should have constitutional rights. And that was resoundingly defeated. And I think elites around the world have been embarrassed by the public defeating their referendums, from Brexit to the Irish constitutional change. And I think the Australians elite realise that the Australian people have got far more important concerns, the same concerns we have about the economy and so forth. This is not the time to discuss the monarchy.
And Rafe, do you think actually the younger elements of the family, I'm talking in particular about the Princess of Wales and Prince and Princess of Wales, actually, perhaps in the Anglosphere, it's their popularity that will actually give the monarchy a bit of a...
Oh, absolutely. And all the polling shows that. I mean, you know, 1/3 of Australians want a republic tomorrow. Another third want to remain a constitutional monarchy. The rest of Australians either don't care or they want to kick the issue down the road. And the great news here is that more Australians think that the monarchy is good than bad, more are proud of it than are embarrassed by it. And a majority of Australians have an affection for the monarchy and think it's a good thing. And as you say, the King is more popular than any Australian politician, and Prince William is more popular even than the King, which is very good for all talk about succession.
Yeah, and I mean, just finally then, which countries do you think would be next to say...
Well, I think we have to look to the Caribbean, because unfortunately the Caribbean has become infected by a lot of the woke mind virus emanating from America when we hear about decolonization and slavery and all this sort of nonsense. So I think Jamaica is where most people would have their money bet. But again, you know, whether that will ever come to pass in the next few years remains to be seen. It's very tricky to become a republic.
Yes, indeed. All right, Rafe, thank you very much for that update. I do appreciate it as ever. Never dull, never unsound, Rafe Heydel-Mankoo. Now, you're with me, Darren Grimes, on GB News. We've got loads more coming up on the show.